Death Trash is a strange game, but it's great. I think I can recommend it pretty simply. 1. Can you handle gore and body horror? 2. Do you like RPGs? If you answered yes to both of those questions, then play this game. If that intro made you want to sympathy vomit, then I'd recommend checking out this setting in the options here. It's in early access, so you can wait on it if you want. Playing through the current content at the moment is about 5 hours, maybe a couple more depending on how completionist you are. If you're like me, however, and you take recommendations to heart only for the game to enter a giant queue of games that you'd like to get around to playing, maybe I can convince you to let this one jump the line a little bit. The gameplay is sort of like if a classic Fallout had real-time combat. Don't go in expecting Fallout though. The inspiration is apparent, but this game is definitely an individual. The game has heart, and playing it really gives the sense that these developers are making exactly the game they wanted to make. It has this really interesting juxtaposition of very direct but often silly characters with a setting that would be incredibly dark and grim if not for the writing and the characters livening it up. It's a great example of how to use levity to take the edge off your otherwise very heavy setting. That setting itself is really interesting to me as well. It seems like you don't know as much about the world as your character does, and they don't really stop to explain it to you. You pick up bits and pieces as you go, and you try to put together the bigger picture in your head. I appreciate though that those bits and pieces themselves aren't presented in an obtuse way either. Some indie games like to copy a certain someone, and suddenly all the world building is done through the barely coherent ravings of madmen in between bouts of laughter. I know that really does it for some people, but I'm not one of them. Death Trash strikes a good balance, where people don't go out of their way to give you big exposition dumps, and that can create mystery, but the bits of world building that you receive that help answer your questions aren't presented in such an obtuse way that you might just lose interest in the game's setting altogether. I want to talk about what I really find interesting about this setting, so if you want to go into this fully story blind, then go to this timestamp. In the opening of the game, you're being kicked out of society. You're contaminated and you keep puking, and for whatever reason, that means you have to go. The robots in charge give you 2 rules: don't come back and don't breed. What I find really interesting is that this game takes something that is often the centerpiece of other stories, robots taking over, and decides it's already happened. Humans made robots to make their lives easier, and eventually that went so far that the humans weren't in charge anymore. That's fine though, because you're hooked up to the cyber womb. In there, you get to live in a virtual reality where you feel comfortable and safe. But there's a lot of people in the outside world. It seems like they must be kicking a lot of people out. Apparently the bots used to be nicer, too, like they really cared about humans. Now they're cold and apathetic. Outside, there are what, in another setting, would be mysterious eldritch forces intangibly manipulating the world, but in Death Trash, they're just here. You can go talk to them. They might be lonely. Alright, spoilers over. This setting is just such a hit for me. It feels so fresh, and it pulls off a really great execution of dark comedy with a very tangible beating heart at the center of it all. Let's talk about the game's art. It's definitely one of its most striking assets, and it's what caught my eye and got me looking at this game in the first place. In a Q&A with GameDeveloper.com, the game's creator said this during a response to a question about making the game pixel art. The art of Death Trash is up to interpretation, which works good for having sickening elements like blood and puke in the game, meaning the viewer has a chance to adjust the extremity of it in their own mind, maybe take the edge off. This intention pays off, and not only for the reason he mentioned. I think body horror in realistically styled game graphics can often look kinda goofy. Death Trash's abstraction helps save it from this in my eyes by allowing your imagination to fill in the blanks in a way that's uniquely effective to your own eye. The abstraction also works to keep you guessing and trying to figure out what's going on in this world. It's even able to use the limited space that the camera can see to raise your curiosity, as you sometimes wonder what's sitting just off the edge of the screen. Matching that art is great sound design. The weapons sound deliciously meaty and powerful. And, so does the meat. The love in the game doesn't just show through in the setting and the art direction, but even in some of the moment-to-moment gameplay. The game launched with some really nice quality of life features, like being able to just click a spot on your map and make your character walk there automatically. I also like the memorize function on notes. When you pick up a note, it goes into your normal inventory right alongside your guns and your 40 pieces of meat. This makes it easy to remember when you have an unread note, and you can just read it straight from there. When you're done, you hit E to memorize, which consumes the item, but adds the note to a journal that you can go back to if you ever want to reread it. This would definitely get annoying in other games that overuse these kinds of notes, but Death Trash keeps them short and to the point. The only problem is that if you pick up duplicates, you'll have to drop or memorize them again to clear up your inventory. Additionally, if you're not sure where you want to spend your points during character creation yet, you can wait. This is something that frustrates me in a lot of RPGs because they all work a little bit differently, but when you're starting off you have to make all these decisions about how to build your character, and oftentimes you can't change them or reverse them. So you're somewhat blindly just picking things that sound cool, but you have no idea how they'll actually work out in practice. So being able to do this is really nice. So this way, if you go through character creation and you don't spend any of your points, you can just sit on them like you have a level up you haven't spent yet, and you can deal with it later. It just feels like the devs have played a lot of games and had ideas for how to do certain little things better. And it's weird how uncommon that feeling can be when you're trying new games. There are some things that feel unfinished, like you might expect with an early access game. The story and quests obviously aren't all there yet, but beyond that, some locations feel like their actual purpose hasn't been fully implemented yet. Some of the stories that are told through the environment or the notes left behind sometimes feel like they lack a conclusion. Why were all these people being kept prisoner? Why don't any of them have anything to say about me killing everybody and letting them all out? I could think of other quality of life features I'd like as well, like a faster way to deconstruct weapons, especially if you could just hit a button and deconstruct stuff straight off the ground without having to pick it up and go into your inventory first. I'd also like it if when you were trying to lockpick something but you didn't have any lockpicks, you could just hit a button and immediately craft and use one if you have the materials. I also think that there should be an option with the map to make it pop up as a mini-map in the corner instead. I understand that this would probably often lead to people just leaving it up all the time, and maybe the devs want the screen clear, but it led to me spending so much time walking around with this big map in my face anyways, that I don't know if it's really worth it. I also might like a way to upgrade my inventory size, because I just hoarded too much meat, and I was constantly struggling to carry around everything that I found. You can leave items on the ground, and as far as I can tell, they don't despawn so you can get them back later, but a more official place to store your collection of weird shit might be nice as well. All that being said, I think the game's a great time in its current state, and I'm excited to see it finished. I'm excited about the prospect of seeing more choices, quests, weapons, powers, and enemy types. If you made it this far in the video, then thanks. So I'll give you a couple of tips for if you decide to play the game. First, quick save often. The game mostly only autosaves when you pass through a load zone, but some areas have a lot of different pockets of enemies in them. So if you kill 3 of them but you die on the 4th, you'll have to redo it all. Quick saving preserves your sanity. And if you don't go for a melee build, buy ammo recipes. I skipped them in shops initially because I thought I could maybe find them myself, or that I could just loot enough ammo. But I was wrong, and I spent the first half of my playthrough using a melee weapon without any points in strength or the melee skill. So, that's Death Trash. Go play it. Or else. Yeah? Yeah? Do you have an opinion about this game? I mean, I don't know why you would talk so much if you didn't have very many opinions.